This video almost did not happen because it's been a month. It has been a real month, but it has been a good reading month. So I just had to share. I can't believe that I actually was able to finish Actually, I am gonna finish my 9th book. I'm halfway through my 9th book for January, and I am gonna finish it because I've got like 100 pages left. But I cannot believe, with everything that I've had going on in January, that I managed to finish. That's been my month. That is the embodiment of my month. I can't believe that I finished this many books plus one because I lent another book to somebody, but I can't believe that all of these pages are in my brain after this month. But they are, so let's talk about them. So the first 3 books that I read, actually the very first book that I finished for January was Northern Spy by Flynn. We'll pop that in right here. I lent that to my aunt to read because she loves Ireland and I thought she would find it really interesting. And then I also finished The Secrets We Kept and The Alice Network. I'm not going to talk about these books because I literally just posted a video where I talked about those 3 books, these 3 books, plus another one that I picked up from Reese's Book Club. So if you are interested in finding out more about these books, you can watch that video. But I want to focus on the other books that I haven't talked about, because that's what's so beautiful about these like reading wrap-up videos, is that you don't have to have any reason to talk about these books except for the fact that I finished reading them this month. I have a hair in my lip gloss. Welcome to living with cats. So the next book that I finished in January is Harrow by Joy Williams. And I say this often, but I think I found a new favorite author. This book is in the league of like 1984, Fahrenheit 451, like very dystopian. The author has a really clear picture of what she believes is gonna happen if we don't respect the world and Mother Earth, and if we just throw away all of the beauty that nature gave us. And it comes through in her writing. And I love it. It's fun to read. I did finish another Joy Williams book this month. I'll talk about it when I get to it in the list. Not only did I give it a 5 out of 5 stars, but I gave it a wow. Like, wow, so good. And then I realized that she's been writing for like a long time. So this book was just published in 2021, but she has a bunch of other books that were published earlier. So I picked up, I believe it was her very first popular novel, and I did read that this month as well. So I'll tell you about it when I get to it. But for this book, 5 out of 5 stars, absolutely recommend. I think I found this book in Wall Street Journal. That's how I heard about it. Highly recommend if you're into that kind of dystopian fiction. The next book I finished is called Rivers in the Desert by Margaret Leslie Davis. Now, I am an Angelino because I live in Los Angeles, and I actually was born in Los Angeles too, so I'm like legit Angelino. I'm a SoCal girl through and through. I picked this book up because somebody at work actually told me about it, and he mentioned that the story of how Los Angeles became Los Angeles is because of William Mulholland, and this is a book about how he brought water to Los Angeles, and it's the water brought to Los Angeles that enabled the population to grow from 100,000 back in the early 20th century to the millions and millions that it is today. This is the reason. And you can see I indexed this book because the politics was so fascinating. The private companies and the private enterprises that profited off of bringing water to Los Angeles and the land speculation. It was just very interesting. I feel like there's a lot to learn from early urban development, at least, you know, on the West Coast. The East Coast has been developing for hundreds of years, as we all well know, because I've been studying that history quite a bit in the last couple of years. But in terms of the West Coast, it's only been urbanized in the last like 100 years or so. Like, we're still very, very young. This was a really interesting book. I also gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I highly enjoyed it, and I'm excited to learn more about Los Angeles's history. The next book that I finished is David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. So yes, I finally finished one of the Malcolm Gladwell books that I have, because I have a whole collection of them. And I have a tendency to do that. Like when I hear good things about an author and I'm like book shopping, as I do, I'll just buy a bunch of books by that author. Like I'll commit to that author. So I really hope that I like them. I loved David and Goliath. It's about underdogs, misfits, and the art of battling giants. He talks about how your disadvantages can actually be advantages. He uses real life examples. Every single chapter has 2 or 3 different stories, and they seem very disconnected until he finds his theme and he weaves it through and it becomes apparent the lesson he's trying to tell you. I thought it was really fun to read. It was a very quick read as well, and I'm excited to read his other books. But I will say that after I read it, I'm like, I think I have read a Malcolm Gladwell book before. Otherwise, I have read an author that writes very similarly to he does. I also gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I know it seems like I throw out 5 out of 5s all the time, and that's because I do, but it's because I try to pick up books that I anticipate are gonna be 5 out of 5 star books. But not every book is a 5 out of 5 star book. The stuff that I picked up from Reese, if you go watch that video, you'll see what I rated it. None of those books were 5 out of 5, though a couple of them were pretty good. This one though, definitely 5 out of 5. I got some good information from it, made me feel better about my life. You know, us overachievers, we tend to suffer from imposter syndrome. Sometimes we need a book or a person to give us some wisdom that tells us you are okay just the way that you are. So yes, to this book. So I mentioned that I finished another Joy Williams book this year. We're still in January, Michelle, okay? We don't want 2022 to just fly by without us noticing. This month I finished The Changeling by Joy Williams. And before I even talk about the book, can I just say that this is an absolutely gorgeous cover. Like, look, this is a hardcover, right? And it didn't come with a book jacket, but look at the design on this book, to die for. This is a book that you display cover out for sure on your bookshelf. It is absolutely gorgeous. So what did I think about this book? It was, again, very kind of dystopian vibes, but it wasn't a dystopian world. It was this very broken woman, but you sympathize with her. Basically, she ends up getting pregnant by this kind of crazy dude. She tries to run away from him. That's where the story starts. She ran away with her baby that she just had, and she's getting drunk in a bar, and he finds her and he brings her back to the compound that they're living on. So it's a really kind of like tumultuous beginning to this story, but it goes with the story. Like this feeling of uneasiness and not really knowing what's happening, what's going on, is kind of part of the experience of reading the book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, but I think it's more me than it is the book, because there's a lot of like themes that Joy Williams weaves into her stories that you kind of have to like really think about what it is she's written. There's a lot of double meanings to a lot of stuff that happens that maybe on the first read you're not gonna get. So her books, easy reads, quick reads, but definitely worth double, treble reads, because there's a lot in here and she really has a lot of messages to portray and to give the audience. So I will probably go back to this book at some point. The first read through, I gave it a 4 out of 5, but that's only because there's a lot that I didn't understand. But again, I think that was more me than it was Joy. So girl, you did it again. Oh, by the way, this book was published originally in 1978. And this was like a really popular book when it first came out. And I also got another couple of Joy Williams books that I'm gonna read in the future. Don't know when. We've got like 300 books on the TBR right now, but we'll get there. What is going on up there? That's life with upstairs neighbors. The next book that I finished this month is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Now, I have picked up quite a few classics that I would just want to have in my collection. I don't think I've ever read The Catcher in the Rye before. I was drawn to it because I know that it's been on a lot of banned book lists, and you know, if a book is banned, I want to read it because I'm a rebel like that. You know what I mean? I didn't know why this book was banned when I read it. And then I looked it up and it was because there's like cussing, but like he mostly just says goddamn, like that's the cussing that's in it. And then there's like the F word a couple of times at the end. I guess since the book was written for like teenagers, that's what the problem was. Like parents didn't want teenagers talking like this. I don't blame them though, because the voice in this book is so unique. You do find yourself talking like the narrator. And the narrator is this 17-year-old boy, and he's talking about what happened a year ago when he was 16. He'd been kicked out of all these boarding schools, and then he was kicked out of another boarding school, and he doesn't want to go home. It's like right before Christmas break, and he doesn't want to face his parents. Remember, this is all happening in like the 1930s, and so, you know, 1930s or 40s, I think, is when it takes place around New York. And so, you know, the communication, like they couldn't just like text his parents and be like, hey, your son got kicked out of school. Like he was somehow able to just leave his boarding school for a week and wander around the city and get a hotel and go drink in clubs, and his parents were like none the wiser. They still had no idea that he'd been kicked out of school yet. I gave it a 3.5 stars, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that out loud because, again, I think it was more me than it was him. It was just, I had a hard time finding the point of this story, like why we were learning about the narrator. His name was Holden Caulfield, that's right. The big question that I had is, why is he telling the story of this particular week in his life? Like, what is it about this week that was so special to tell the story? Like, that's just what my question was. I think that maybe it's just really meant to be a novel that's like a snapshot in a life. Like there's not really supposed to be anything particularly special about this week, except for that it's more of like a coming of age moment for him and for the character himself. It was an important pivotal moment. Again, this is another book I think is worth another read. And the voice is so unique. This is your buddy who is sitting there talking to you. And I was like annoyed with the narrator the way that I would be annoyed at listening to any 17-year-old boy tell me a story for as long as it took me to read the book. You know what I mean? Like when you're not a 17-year-old boy, sitting there and hanging out with a 17-year-old boy for hours on end can be exhausting, even if you like them. It's a teenage boy. Need I say more? So I did like the book. I did enjoy it. It will probably get another read from me. It lives in my collection. I'm glad I finally read it. Like, I'm glad it's under my belt. This is like, you know, a bucket list book. So there you go. That's that one. And this book right here, as I see it, The Autobiography of J. Paul Getty, is the last book that I am going to finish this month because, like I said, I've just got like a little over 100 pages left, like 125 pages left to go. And it's really fun. If you live in LA or you've been to the LA area, then you must have heard of the Getty Museum or the Getty Villa. These are estates, these are museums that are fully funded by J. Paul Getty's estate to this day. And it is the most valuable pieces of land in all of Los Angeles. Like, these pieces of land are worth billions of dollars, just these pieces of land. He was a very rich guy. He was an oil guy. He wrote this autobiography. Like, anybody who's anybody, he knew who they were. And so I think that's really like fun and interesting. Like, he talks about hanging out with Zsa Zsa Gabor, and then he's also like good friends with the Duke of Windsor. He went to high school with him, so you know, they're like really good friends. King David, who later abdicated the throne, if you don't know, now you know. He literally hangs out with anybody. Actually, this book got published the year that he died, 1976. He didn't know he was gonna die, I don't think, but he just happened to be writing this autobiography right at the end of his life. Like, it came out right at the end of his life. It's a lot of name dropping. I'm sure that if I were alive in the late 1970s and I read this book when it was originally published, I probably would have known a lot more people that he mentions. But even so, I do know a lot of the names. Like, Cary Grant, Charlie Chaplin. Like, these are the kind of names that he's dropping in this book. Also, he talks about some of the deals that he makes and what his lifestyle looked like. I think one of the things that we forget about like super uber wealthy people like this is, you know, we think their life is just like all parties and money and yachts, and it is. They do have a lot of those things, but also they're really friggin' busy. Like, to keep making all that money and to keep running these businesses with all these thousands and thousands of employees, it's a lot of freaking work. And for decades of his life, he was living in England, meaning to come move back to Southern California and saying, okay, by the holiday times this year, I will be back living in Southern California. But then business things keep coming up and he has to travel to other places in Europe, to other places in the Middle East. It's a lot of freaking work being rich. I'm sorry, it is. It's a responsibility that I will take if God decides to bestow it upon me. That was my reading wrap up for January. It's been a good reading month. My goal for this year is to read 100 books. So God willing, I reach my goal, but I am well on my way to reaching that goal, and I'm super excited. I've got so many good books on my TBR. If you have any books to recommend to me based on what I have read so far, and you're like, oh, Michelle, you're gonna love this book, please leave it in the comments. I would love to see your book recommendations. And it would be even funnier if like I already had it in my collection and I hadn't read it. If you enjoyed this book and you want to see this video, maybe one day I'll write a book, but this is a video. Keep focused. Okay, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos like this and me talking about these videos. If you want other people to find our book club so that we can all enjoy it together, please hit the like button. It does help people find my channel. You can also follow me on my other social medias. I've got an Instagram, I've got a Twitter. I'll leave those linked below as well. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.